Welcome to the Sleep Dives channel. Today, we're jumping into pages 281 to 315, and we're going to tackle a question that, let's be honest, affects every single one of us. Why do we so often get each other so wrong? We're going to explore those invisible mental shortcuts that can lead to so much conflict, and, more importantly, discover a toolkit that can really change how we talk, listen, and connect with each other.
This quote just perfectly captures it, doesn't it? That silent, lightning-fast process we're here to unpack. So picture this. You're in a presentation, right? And your colleague, let's call him Larry, he's just sitting there quietly. Instantly, a story just ignites in your head. You select one piece of data, his silence, and you add your own meaning. He must be bored. Then you make an assumption. He thinks your work is incompetent. And that leads to a conclusion. Larry is against you. And just like that, you're now acting on a belief that you literally built in seconds, all from one tiny observation.
So here's our roadmap for our little journey today. First, we're going to dissect the anatomy of these misunderstandings. Then, we'll bring in a really powerful model called the ladder of inference to help us actually see our own thinking. From there, we'll open up a toolkit for reflection, and we'll focus on that crucial balance between advocating for our own views and inquiring into others. And finally, we'll land on how you can start putting all this into practice, like today. Okay, let's dive into this first section. You know, that story about Larry, that's not just some random example. It's a universal human experience. We all do it. We take in some data from the world, and our minds just race to build a narrative around it, which leads us to a conclusion and then an action, often in the blink of an eye.
And this right here, this gets to the absolute heart of the problem. That whole mental journey from what we see to what we do, it's completely private. It's invisible to everyone else. They just see the starting point, like Larry's silence, and they see our final action, maybe treating him with a bit of suspicion. But that whole story we built in between, that stays hidden. And that gap, that's the real breeding ground for miscommunication.
So, the big question is, how do we make this invisible process, well, visible? That is where our next tool comes in, the ladder of inference. It's just a brilliant way to map out those hidden mental steps, what the source calls our leaps of abstraction, where we jump from a concrete fact to a massive conclusion in an instant.
Okay, let's climb this ladder together, step by step. At the very bottom, we have raw, observable data. You know, what a camera would record. Larry is quiet. Next rung up, we select a piece of that data. We focus only on his silence. On the third rung, we add meaning. Silence means he's bored. From there, we make an assumption. He's bored because he thinks I'm incompetent. Then we draw a conclusion. Larry doesn't respect my work. This hardens into a belief. Larry is an adversary. And finally, at the top, we take action based on that belief. We might avoid him or get defensive in the next meeting. See how fast that happened?
And this is where things get really dangerous. We get stuck in what's called a reflexive loop. Because I now believe Larry is my adversary, the next time we're in a meeting, I'm going to be actively looking for data that confirms that belief. I'll interpret his every action through that filter, which just reinforces my assumptions. And meanwhile, he's probably climbing his own ladder about my strange behavior, and before you know it, we're bitter enemies without ever having a real conversation about it.
And if you want to see the real-world cost of this, check this out. It's staggering. The source gives this incredible example. You can have a team of brilliant people, average IQs of 140, but their collective intelligence can plummet to an IQ of 85. Why? Simply because they're all operating on their own untested assumptions. That's the profound impact of these hidden mental models. So knowing how damaging this can be, what on earth do we do about it?
Okay, so we've diagnosed the problem, we've seen how the ladder works and the damage it can cause. Now let's switch gears and talk about the solution. We're going to open up a practical toolkit that's designed to make our hidden thinking visible, both to ourselves and to others. This is where we get to flip the script, you know? The ladder isn't just a diagnosis of a problem, it actually becomes a powerful tool for better communication. We can use it in 3 key ways. First, for reflection, just slowing down and asking ourselves, hang on, what data did I just use? What assumptions am I making here? Second, for advocacy, clearly explaining our own reasoning, walking others up our ladder. And third, for inquiry, helping others do the same by asking questions that explore their thinking.
I mean, just think about that for a second. What if you could literally see the gap between what you're thinking and what you're actually saying? What could you learn? Well, this brings us to our next powerful tool.
This is called the left-hand column exercise. It's incredibly simple, but so revealing. On the right, you write down what was actually said in a tough conversation, and on the left, you write what you were thinking and feeling but didn't say. Look at this example with Jim and his supervisor Todd. On the surface, what was said is polite, it's accommodating, but his left-hand column, well, it reveals a completely different story, one filled with blame and frustration. This exercise makes that hidden gap tangible.
So, once you've created your own left-hand column, the real work begins with reflection. You've got to ask yourself these kinds of questions. What did I really want to achieve here? Why didn't I just say what was on my mind? What assumptions was I making about them? And crucially, what was the cost of operating this way? This analysis, this is where the really deep learning happens.
And this whole toolkit, it really brings us to the core discipline needed for truly productive conversations. It's not about winning an argument, and it's not just about asking questions. It's about skillfully balancing the two. It's about finding the right balance between advocacy and inquiry.
Think of it like this. On one side, you've got high advocacy and low inquiry. That's just a pure argument. You're just pushing your point of view. On the other side, high inquiry and low advocacy. That can feel like an interrogation, right? You're just peppering someone with questions but not sharing your own thoughts. Both of these are pretty dysfunctional. The goal is to land in that sweet spot where you clearly advocate for your view and genuinely inquire into the views of others. That's the space where real learning happens.
So how do you actually do this? Well, here are some simple protocols for better advocacy. Instead of just stating your conclusion, you state your assumptions. You walk people through your reasoning. You give real examples. And I love this one. You reveal where you are least clear. That's not a sign of weakness. It's an invitation for others to help you improve your thinking. It's collaborative.
And for inquiry, it's all about creating safety and genuine curiosity. So instead of well, what's your proof for that? You use phrases like, can you help me understand your thinking here? You're not trying to trap them. You're genuinely trying to see the world from their perspective, to understand the ladder that they've climbed.
Okay, so we've covered the theory, the models, and the skills. But this brings us to the most important question of all. How do we actually start doing this? Because let's be real, it can feel a little unnatural at first. Well, the source suggests using what it calls conversational recipes or opening lines. These are phrases you can practice and just have ready to go. Look at this one. It's fantastic. You may be right. That immediately lowers the other person's defenses. But I'd like to understand more. That signals genuine curiosity. What leads you to believe that? This is just a direct, non-confrontational invitation for them to walk you down their ladder of inference. And here is a concrete first step you can take on your own. Pick a situation that's been bothering you. Write out a left-hand column for it, and then use those reflection questions we looked at earlier to analyze what you wrote. And please remember this last point. It's so important. The goal here is radical self-awareness. This is a tool for understanding your own thinking, not for telling other people how they're wrong. The work always starts with you.
So, to bring this all together, if there's one single thing to take away from all this, it's this. Those invisible, automatic, and seemingly reasonable leaps that our minds make are the very source of our most painful and persistent misunderstandings. By learning to see them, we give ourselves the power to change them.
And that leaves us with a final question for you to reflect on. Think about a relationship or a recurring difficult conversation in your own life. What might happen if you started, even in a small way, to make your own thinking a bit more visible and to genuinely inquire into theirs? What could change for you?